What happens when the person you love most becomes your greatest threat? This heart-stopping true story will leave you questioning everything you think you know about trust, betrayal, and redemption. Hello, beautiful souls. Tonight's story will take you on a journey where hearts are tested and destinies collide. The journey starts now. The rain hammered against the windows of the abandoned warehouse like bullets, each drop a reminder of the storm that had torn through Elena's life 6 months ago. She pressed her back against the cold brick wall, clutching the flash drive that contained enough evidence to destroy the man she once loved. Her breath came in short bursts, visible in the frigid air, as footsteps echoed somewhere in the darkness beyond. "I know you're here, Elena." Marcus Kane's voice cut through the silence like a blade. "We need to talk." She closed her eyes, remembering how that same voice had once whispered promises in her ear, how those hands now hunting her had once traced gentle patterns across her skin. The scar on her left shoulder throbbed where his bullet had grazed her during their last encounter, a physical reminder that the man she'd shared 2 years of her life with was now her greatest threat. "Talk?" she called out, her voice steadier than she felt. "Like we talked when you left me bleeding in that hotel room in Prague?" His footsteps stopped. In the silence, she could hear the steady drip of water from a leak somewhere above, counting seconds like a ticking bomb. That wasn't supposed to happen. His voice was closer now, maybe 20 feet away. "You weren't supposed to be there that night." Elena laughed, the sound harsh and broken in the empty space. "Which part? The part where I discovered you'd been using our relationship as cover for arms dealing? Or the part where you tried to kill me to keep it quiet?" She shifted position, her hand instinctively moving to the knife strapped to her thigh. The warehouse was her territory now, every shadow and hiding spot mapped during weeks of preparation. If Marcus thought he could corner her here, he'd forgotten who taught him how to disappear in the first place. "I never wanted to hurt you," he said, and for a moment, his voice cracked with something that might have been genuine regret. "But you saw the manifest. You knew what it meant. I knew what it meant when I saw children's names on shipping lists next to weapons specifications." The memory made her sick. "How long, Marcus? How long were you trafficking kids while I slept next to you every night?" The silence stretched between them, heavy with all the words they'd never said and all the lies that had finally crumbled. Elena had spent 6 months tracking down every connection, every deal, every life he'd destroyed. The flash drive in her hand contained bank records, shipping manifests, and recorded conversations that would put him away forever, if she lived long enough to deliver it. 3 years, he finally admitted, his voice barely audible. It started as legitimate security contracts. But the money... God, Elena, the money was worth more than innocent lives. She heard him moving again, circling around to her left. He was trying to flank her, using tactics they'd practiced together during their time with private security. But she'd learned new tricks since then, harder lessons written in scars and sleepless nights. "You don't understand the pressure I was under," Marcus said. "The debts, the threats. They would have killed us both if I hadn't. So you decided to kill children instead." Elena slipped from her hiding spot, moving silently through the maze of broken machinery and debris. The warehouse had once manufactured textiles, before the economy collapsed and left it to rot. Now it served as a tomb for their relationship, and possibly for one of them tonight. She could see him now, silhouetted against the dim light filtering through grimy windows. He'd cut his hair shorter, grown a beard to change his appearance. But she knew the way he moved, the careful precision that had once made her feel safe and now filled her with ice-cold fear. Marcus turned suddenly, and their eyes met across the empty space. In that moment, she saw the man she'd fallen in love with, the one who'd held her during nightmares and made her laugh during their quiet moments together. She also saw the monster he'd become, the one who'd turned their shared knowledge against her and left her for dead. I'm not the same person I was 6 months ago, she said, raising her weapon. You made sure of that. He raised his hands, but she could see the gun tucked into his waistband. Elena, please. There's something you need to know about that night. In Prague. Something that changes everything. The words hit her like a physical blow, because she could hear truth in his voice, raw and desperate. After everything he'd done, after all the lies and betrayal, he still had the power to make her hesitate. What are you talking about? Marcus took a step forward, his eyes never leaving hers. The operation that night, the one you stumbled into. I wasn't running it, Elena. I was trying to stop it. Elena's hand tightened on her weapon, but her mind reeled from Marcus's words. The rain continued its relentless assault on the warehouse roof, creating a symphony of doubt that matched the chaos in her thoughts. You're lying, she whispered, though something in her chest was already cracking open. I saw the contracts, with your signature, your bank accounts, your voice on those recordings. Marcus slowly reached into his jacket, moving with deliberate care. I'm going to show you something. Don't shoot me for it. He pulled out a photograph, holding it where she could see. Even in the dim light, she recognized the face staring back at her. Her own face, younger by 3 years, smiling at a camera she didn't remember posing for. Where did you get that? From your file, he said quietly. The one they gave me when they recruited me to watch you. You were never my assignment, Elena. You were always theirs. The world tilted sideways. Elena felt her knees threaten to buckle, but she forced herself to stay upright, to keep the gun trained on the man who kept shattering everything she thought she knew about her life. That's impossible. I met you at that security conference in Vienna. You spilled coffee on my laptop. Staged. His voice was hollow now, stripped of pretense. They'd been tracking you for months. Your work with refugee advocacy groups, your connections to certain political figures. They wanted someone close to you, someone who could monitor your activities and report back. Elena's breath came in sharp bursts. They who? The same people trafficking those children, the ones I was trying to bring down from the inside. Marcus took another careful step forward. I was undercover federal, Elena. Deep cover. So deep that when you discovered that manifest, my own handlers didn't know if they could trust me anymore. The flash drive felt heavy in her pocket, loaded with evidence that might not mean what she'd thought it meant. The night in Prague. You shot me. I grazed you to make it look real. If I hadn't, they would have put a bullet in your brain. His voice cracked. I've been trying to find you for 6 months to explain, to warn you. They think you have information that could expose the entire network. Do I? Marcus nodded grimly. More than you realize. That advocacy group you worked with, Sanctuary International, half their board members are fronts for the trafficking operation. Every refugee family you helped relocate, every safe house you established, they used that information to identify targets. Elena felt sick. All those families, all those children she'd thought she was protecting. How many? Hundreds. The word fell between them like a stone. Maybe more. You built them a roadmap to the most vulnerable people in 3 countries. She wanted to pull the trigger, to end this conversation and the horrible truth it was revealing. But her finger wouldn't move, frozen by the possibility that everything she'd believed for the past 6 months was wrong. Why should I trust you? Now, she demanded. After 2 years of lies? Because they sent someone else to finish what I supposedly started. Marcus pulled out his phone, showing her a text message. Kai Nakamura landed in the city 3 hours ago. And unlike me, he won't hesitate to put you down permanently. The name hit her like ice water. She knew Kai by reputation, a ghost who left no witnesses and no evidence. If he was here, she was already dead. He's the one who's been cleaning up loose ends from the trafficking network, Marcus continued. 3 witnesses dead in the past month. all made to look like accidents or suicides. You're next on his list. Elena lowered her weapon slightly, her mind racing through possibilities and escape routes. If what you're saying is true, then why are you here? Why risk exposure? To warn me? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was raw with emotion. Because falling in love with you wasn't part of the assignment. And watching you walk into that hotel room 6 months ago, knowing what was waiting for you, was the worst moment of my life. The confession hung in the air between them, fragile and dangerous. Elena felt her carefully constructed walls beginning to crumble, the same walls that had kept her alive and focused on revenge for half a year. I don't know what's real anymore, she admitted. This is real? Marcus reached slowly toward her face, stopping just short of touching her cheek. What we had, what we felt, that was the only true thing in 2 years of lies. A sound echoed from somewhere in the warehouse, the soft scrape of metal against concrete. Both of them froze, weapons raised, as a new voice cut through the darkness. How touching, came a smooth, accented voice from the shadows. A reunion between star-crossed lovers. Kai Nakamura stepped into view, his weapon already trained on Elena's chest. He was smaller than she'd expected, almost delicate-looking, but she could see the predator in his eyes. Mr. Kane, Kai continued conversationally, I have to admit, I'm disappointed. Your reports indicated the target had been neutralized months ago. Yet here she is, very much alive and apparently in possession of some rather inconvenient evidence. Marcus shifted slightly, positioning himself between Elena and Kai. There were complications. Yes, I can see that. Kai's smile was cold and sharp. Fortunately, I'm here to resolve all complications permanently. Elena felt Marcus tense beside her, preparing to move. In that moment, she realized that whatever games had been played between them, whatever lies had been told, he was ready to die to protect her. The question was whether she was ready to let him. The standoff lasted 3 heartbeats before chaos erupted. Marcus lunged sideways, shouting for Elena to run as Kai's first shot shattered concrete where her head had been a second before. She rolled behind a rusted piece of machinery, her own weapon ready as gunfire echoed through the warehouse like thunder. You always were too sentimental, Kane, Kai called out, his voice unnaturally calm amid the violence. It's why you were never suited for this kind of work. Elena heard Marcus grunt in pain and risk a glance around her cover. He was pressed against a support pillar, blood seeping through his shirt from a wound in his shoulder. Their eyes met, across the space, and he mouthed a single word. Go. But she couldn't leave him. Not when she finally understood that everything she'd believed about him might be wrong. Not when he'd just put himself between her and a killer without hesitation. The federal records say you're dead, Nakamura, Marcus called back, applying pressure to his wound. Car accident in Tokyo. Very tragic. So who are you really working for now? Kai laughed, the sound sharp and brittle. The highest bidder, as always. Though in this case, they want to ensure certain information never sees daylight. Information currently residing on a flash drive in Ms. Reyes's possession. Elena's blood ran cold. How did he know about the flash drive? She'd told no one about it. Shared her evidence with no one. Unless... Marcus, she said quietly, her voice carrying across the warehouse. How did he know about the drive? The silence that followed was answer enough. Marcus closed his eyes, and she saw the truth written in his expression, in the way his shoulders sagged with defeat. You son of a bitch, she breathed. Even now, even after everything you just told me. Elena, please. Marcus's voice was broken. I had to. They have my sister. They've had her for 3 years. Every assignment, every lie. It was all to keep Sarah alive. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical wound. Elena felt something inside her chest shatter completely. The last fragile hope that there might be something real between them dying in the cold warehouse air. "Where is she?" Kai interrupted conversationally. "The drive, Ms. Reyes. Hand it over and I'll make this quick for both of you." Elena's mind raced through her options. The warehouse had multiple exits, but Kai would have them covered. She could try to use Marcus as a hostage, but that assumed he wouldn't sacrifice himself to complete his mission. The evidence on the drive was her only leverage, her only chance of surviving this encounter. "What's to stop you from killing us once you have it?" she called back. "Absolutely nothing," Kai replied cheerfully. "But you'll die either way. The only question is how much pain you experience first." A new sound cut through the tension, the distant wail of sirens approaching fast. Elena saw Marcus straighten with surprise, then look at her with something like hope. "You called the police?" "Better," Elena said, pulling out a second phone she'd kept hidden. "I called Agent Sarah Kane and told her where to find her missing brother." The color drained from Marcus's face. "Sarah's not a hostage. She's FBI. She's been coordinating the investigation from Washington." The pieces clicked into place with horrible clarity. Marcus had been played by his own handlers, manipulated into believing his sister was in danger to ensure his complete cooperation. The trafficking network had people inside federal law enforcement, people who could fabricate threats and manufacture crises to control their assets. "Impossible," Kai snarled, his composure finally cracking. "We verified the situation. The girl was taken 3 years ago." "The girl in the photos, yes," Elena said, understanding flooding through her. "But not his sister. You showed him pictures of some other victim and convinced him it was Sarah. How many other agents are you controlling with manufactured threats against their families?" The sirens were getting closer, and Elena could see the flashing lights beginning to reflect off the warehouse windows. But Kai wasn't retreating. Instead, he was advancing, his weapon trained on Marcus with deadly intent. "If I can't complete the mission," Kai said calmly, "then at least I can eliminate the compromised asset." Time slowed to a crawl. Elena saw Kai's finger tighten on the trigger, saw Marcus realize what was about to happen and try to move. She didn't think, didn't hesitate, just launched herself across the open space between them. The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space. Elena felt the bullet tear through her side as she collided with Marcus, driving them both to the ground behind the pillar. Pain exploded through her torso, but she was alive, and more importantly, so was he. "You idiot," Marcus gasped, pressing, his hands against her wound to slow the bleeding. "Why would you do that?" Elena looked up at him, seeing the man she'd fallen in love with overlaid with the stranger who'd betrayed her, and realized that both versions were true. He was capable of love and sacrifice, but also of terrible choices made in the name of protecting someone he cared about. "Because someone has to break the cycle," she whispered. "Someone has to choose trust over fear." The warehouse doors burst, open as federal agents flooded in, shouting orders and securing the scene. Elena saw Kai raise his weapon toward the approaching agents and knew he would never be taken alive. The final gunshots rang out like exclamation points, ending the violence, as abruptly as it had begun. As paramedics worked to stabilize her wounds, Elena felt Marcus take her hand. "The drive," he said urgently. "Whatever evidence you have, it needs to reach the right people. There are others like me, other agents being controlled through manufactured threats." She squeezed his fingers weakly. "I know. I've been in contact with a journalist, someone outside the system. The story goes public tomorrow, regardless of what happens to us." Marcus stared at her with something like admiration. "You never trusted me. Not completely. Even when you thought you did." "I wanted to," Elena admitted, as darkness began to creep in around the edges of her vision. "But wanting something and being able to afford it are different things." The last thing she saw before consciousness faded was Agent Sarah Kane kneeling beside her brother, very much alive and very much concerned for the man who'd been manipulated into believing she was dead. Elena woke to the steady beep of hospital monitors and the antiseptic smell that seemed to coat everything in the sterile room. Sunlight streamed through blinds, painting golden stripes across the white sheets that covered her bandaged torso. For a moment, she allowed herself to believe that the past year had been nothing more than a fever dream. Then she turned her head and saw Marcus sitting in the visitor's chair, his own arm in a sling, staring out the window with hollow eyes. "How long?" she asked, her voice rough from the breathing tube they'd removed. 4 days, he replied without looking at her. "You coded twice on the operating table. The doctor said it was touch and go for a while." Elena tried to sit up and immediately regretted it as pain shot through her side. Marcus moved to help her, then stopped himself, his hand hovering uncertainly in the air between them. "Don't," she said quietly. "Don't pretend we're something we're not." He pulled his hand back, the rejection hitting him like a physical blow. "Elena, I need you to understand. I understand perfectly." She cut him off, her voice steady despite the pain. "You chose your sister over me, over us, over the truth. I don't blame you for that choice, Marcus. But I can't forgive it either." The silence stretched between them, heavy with all the words they couldn't take back and all the choices that had led them to this sterile room where love went to die. "Your journalist friend," Marcus said finally. "Jennifer Walsh. Her story broke yesterday morning. 17 arrests so far, including 2 federal supervisors and a State Department liaison. The trafficking network is in shambles." Elena felt a grim satisfaction, but it was tempered by the knowledge of what the revelations had cost. How many other agents like you were there? 12 that we know of. All of us convinced that someone we loved was in danger. All of us feeding information to the very people we thought we were fighting against. Marcus's laugh was bitter and broken. The handlers called it Operation Heartstring. They had entire dossiers on our psychological profiles, knew exactly which emotional pressure points would ensure compliance. And now we're all potentially compromised assets with intimate knowledge of ongoing investigations. The Bureau is deciding whether to prosecute us or bury us so deep we never see daylight again. Elena studied his profile, noting the new lines around his eyes, the way his shoulders curved inward as if he was trying to make himself smaller. "What do you want from me, Marcus?" He finally looked at her then, and she saw the man she'd fallen in love with staring back at her with desperate hope. "I want you to run away with me. Tonight. There's a plane waiting at a private airfield. New identities. Enough money to start over somewhere they'll never find us." The proposal hit her like a punch to the chest. After everything they'd been through, after all the lies and betrayal, he was asking her to abandon her life and disappear with him into the shadows. "You're serious?" "Dead serious." Marcus leaned forward, his voice urgent. "Elena, you don't understand what you've unleashed. The people at the top of this network, they have resources you can't imagine. Government connections, private armies, money that can buy silence or graves with equal ease. That story your friend published, it's just the tip of the iceberg and they know it. So you want me to run. I want you to live." The words came out raw and desperate. "I want us to find some small corner of the world where we can figure out who we are when we're not lying to each other every day." Elena closed her eyes, trying to process the enormity of what he was asking. To leave everything behind, to trust the man who'd betrayed her with her life and her future. It would mean abandoning her work, her friends, her identity. It would mean choosing love over justice, heart over conscience. "There's something else," Marcus said quietly. "Something I haven't told you about the trafficking network, about why they wanted you specifically." She opened her eyes, seeing the weight of another terrible truth in his expression. Your parents' car accident when you were 16. It wasn't an accident. The world stopped. Elena felt her heart skip several beats as the words penetrated her consciousness. What are you talking about? They were investigative journalists working on a story about child trafficking in Eastern Europe. They'd gotten close to exposing the same network we just brought down. Too close. Marcus's voice was barely above a whisper. The accident was staged. Professional job. Made to look like your father fell asleep at the wheel. Elena couldn't breathe. The grief she'd carried for 12 years, the guilt over their last argument, the way she'd dedicated her life to helping refugees in their memory, all of it was built on a lie. How long have you known? Since the beginning. It's why they wanted me close to you. They were worried that you might have inherited your parents' investigative instincts, that you might stumble onto the same connections they'd found. Marcus reached toward her hand, then stopped himself. Elena, I'm sorry. I'm so damned sorry for all of it. She stared at him, this man who'd been the center of her world and the architect of its destruction, and realized that her choice was already made. Had been made the moment she'd thrown herself between him and Kai's bullet. The plane, she said finally. Where does it go? Hope flickered in his eyes. Argentina first, then we disappear completely. New names, new lives, a chance to figure out who we really are underneath all the lies. Elena nodded slowly, then reached for the call button beside her bed. When the nurse appeared, she asked for her clothes and discharge papers. Ma'am, you're not cleared for release. The doctor said at least another week of observation. I'm checking myself out, Elena said firmly. Against medical advice if necessary. As the nurse left to fetch the paperwork, Marcus squeezed her uninjured hand. You won't regret this. I swear. To you, Elena, no more lies. No more secrets. Just us, figuring out what comes next. She looked at him, this beautiful, damaged man who'd betrayed her and saved her in equal measure, and realized that forgiveness wasn't a decision but a process, one that might take years to complete if it was even possible. But she was willing to try. Because in the end, running toward an uncertain future with the devil you love was better than facing a certain death alone. 4 hours later, as their plane lifted off into the darkness above a city that had almost killed them both, Elena made herself a promise. She would learn to trust Marcus Kane again, or she would learn to live without him. Either way, she would learn to survive. 2 years later, Elena stood on a cliff overlooking the Pacific Ocean, watching waves crash against the rocks below with hypnotic rhythm. The small coastal town in Chile had become their sanctuary, a place where no one asked questions about the couple who'd arrived with cash and barely concealed wounds. The scar on her side had faded to a thin white line, but the other scars, the invisible ones, remained tender to the touch. Trust was a muscle that had to be rebuilt slowly, carefully, and some days Elena wasn't sure if she was getting stronger or just learning to live with the weakness. Marcus appeared beside her, carrying 2 cups of coffee and moving with the careful grace of someone who'd learned not to make sudden movements around the person he loved. The beard he'd grown made him look older, more weathered, but his eyes held a peace she'd never seen during their time together in the old life. The call came through, he said quietly, handing her the steaming cup. Jennifer Walsh's follow-up story is running tomorrow. They found the rest of the network. Elena nodded, unsurprised. They'd been feeding information to the journalist through carefully encrypted channels, helping her piece together the full scope of the trafficking operation from their exile. It was dangerous, potentially exposing their location, but some fights were worth the risk. How many more arrests? 43, including a senator and 2 judges. The children they rescued numbered in the hundreds. Marcus sipped his coffee, staring out at the endless horizon. Your parents would be proud. The words still hurt, even after all this time. Elena had spent months processing the truth about her parents' death, cycling through rage and grief and a hollow kind of acceptance. But slowly, she'd begun to understand that honoring their memory meant continuing their work, even from the shadows. "There's something else," Marcus said, his voice careful. "Sarah called. The Bureau wants to offer us immunity in exchange for testimony. Full pardons, new identities through witness protection, a chance to come home." Elena turned to look at him, reading the conflict in his expression. She knew he missed his old life, missed the feeling of belonging to something larger than himself. The isolation of their exile weighed on him more than he admitted. "What did you tell her?" "That it was your choice to make." He met her eyes, and she saw the love there, complicated and scarred but real. "I'll follow whatever decision you make. Elena, home or exile, together or apart. After everything I put you through, the choice has to be yours." She considered the offer, imagining what it would mean to return to their former lives, to testify in courtrooms, to relive the trauma for prosecutors and juries, to spend years looking over their shoulders for revenge from whatever remained of the network. It would mean justice, but it would also mean never truly being free. "Do you remember what you asked me in the warehouse?" she said finally. "About what was real between us." Marcus nodded, his expression cautious. "This is real." Elena gestured to the small house behind them, to the garden they'd planted together, to the quiet life they'd built from the ashes of their old selves. "The way you hold me when I have nightmares, the way I've learned to trust your touch again, the way we've figured out how to love each other without lies. This is the most real thing I've ever known." Relief flooded his features, followed quickly by something that might have been joy. "So we stay." "We stay." Elena stepped closer to him, close enough to see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes. But not as Marcus and Elena. Those people died. In that warehouse, where someone new now, someone better. He cupped her face gently, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. "Who are we then?" Elena smiled, the expression feeling natural for the first time in years. "We're the people who chose love over revenge, trust over safety, truth over comfortable lies. We're the people who learned that forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's choosing to build something new from the pieces of what was broken." Marcus kissed her then, soft and reverent, like a prayer answered. Around them, the Chilean sun painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson, and Elena thought about how endings could also be beginnings if you were brave enough to let them. They would never go home, not to the lives they'd left behind. But they'd found something better in this small town by the sea, in the quiet rhythms of a life lived without deception. They'd found peace in the acceptance that love wasn't about perfection, but about choosing to stay when staying was the hardest thing in the world. Years from now, when other people's secrets caught up with them, when the past inevitably found their doorstep, they would face it together, as partners in the truest sense, bound not by lies or manipulation, but by the conscious decision to build something beautiful from the wreckage of their former selves. Elena took Marcus's hand and led him back toward their small house, toward the life they'd chosen over all the others they could have had. Behind them, the ocean continued its eternal conversation with the shore, speaking in a language older than secrets, older than lies, older than everything except love itself. And in that love, scarred and hard-won as it was, they had found their redemption. The end.